Thank you for joining us today, David. We're here talking about resilience. So can you share a defining moment in your career where you truly tested your resilience?
Sure. I thought I might cheat a bit and give you two, actually. I thought I'd bookend it slightly. So one at the early stage of my career and then one that's a bit more recent, because I think resilience and being tested is something that happens to all of us on a constant cycle. We just kind of get tested in slightly different ways and our resilience builds because of that. So I originally, before I moved into learning development, and I'm the head of coaching and team performance here at Rathbones, so I get the opportunity to work with people to help them build exactly the kind of skills that we're talking about today. But I originally qualified as a solicitor before I moved into learning development. So I used to be a commercial litigator. And I always remember when I think back to those days when I qualified, you kind of get to a point where almost like you're working towards qualification. You know that's what you're working towards, it's what you want to do. And then all of a sudden, the moment creeps up on you. And then overnight, you suddenly take on all the responsibility that you've been looking to. You know, your name goes on everything. And although that was 25 years ago, I still remember it very well, and going from one day being a trainee to being a newly qualified solicitor the next day. And all of a sudden, everyone I'm used to giving me guidance is there and kind of looking at me to know the answers. And I really enjoyed that. I trained in a firm that was particularly known for being very dynamic and entrepreneurial, which meant you took on a lot of responsibility, but then you took on a lot of responsibility and it kind of came quite quickly. So I knew it was coming and I expected it. But then that moment when you suddenly realize all that weight's on your shoulders is quite big. And that definitely tests your resilience. So that's something I am grateful for that experience that I had, and I take a lot of those skills and what I learned along the way into my role now and always have. And that's kind of like at the early stage of my career. And instead I sort of cheat a bit and give you a second. And the second was the organization that I was in before I joined Rathbones. I joined thinking about COVID and lockdown in particular. And I think all of us found that very difficult. It tested all of our resilience, to say the least, in ways we never knew that we were going to have to deal with. So whilst I knew qualifying was one thing, it was coming and I was ready, but I had to be able to embrace that and manage it. COVID, lockdown, none of us could see that coming. And I think it's very easy when we look back to lockdown now to kind of look at it as a point in time and we know we came out of it. But during that period, none of us knew what was going to happen. We didn't know what was happening with the world. And everything we were used to, we spent a long time building up, suddenly changed. And so my personal professional story then is I moved across to a new role in January 2020. It was my first role outside a law firm. I've been working in law firms and professional services for 20 years. And it was my first global head of learning and development role. Started January 2020. And we had a big plan about how I was going to travel, be able to build the team, build the relationships, get to know the business. Then, of course, 2 months later, the world changed. And I was in a position where I'd spent 15 years by then working in learning and development, building the skills to be able to make connections, build relationships, present to rooms, run workshops. And you're used to reading a room and reading people and making those connections. And we then went to a point where you could see this much of something. And it's a very, very different way of working. And I was leading a team, I was leading a function in a large organization. And so having to deal with all those changes and what people wanted and needed in a way that none of us could have seen coming took a real change, as I know it will have for anybody watching this film in the future too.
Yeah. I suppose there's two follow-up points there.
Yeah.
Your two. I mean, the first one is around imposter syndrome almost. I mean, everyone who's had a promotion or, you've got a job where there's more responsibility goes through that sort of imposter syndrome phase of you don't really know what you're doing, but actually you do have to back yourself to some extent. And that's what I would say to people as well.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I suppose around COVID, every different situation, but can you sort of talk us through what successes you achieved after you got over the initial working from home shock?
Yeah, sure. I think that you're absolutely right. Imposter syndrome, I think, is something that so many people face. And very often in my day job, if you like, I spend time talking to people about exactly that. To have the courage and the confidence that got them to where they are and to make the most of that to support and inspire the people that follow them. And we definitely do get that. I think what I took away from that story was having the courage of your convictions, knowing that you do what you do for a reason, and being able to have the confidence to sometimes take your time, take a step back, think about what you're doing, but know you're in the right place to do the right thing, and keep telling yourself that, I think. And sometimes with imposter syndrome, we often have self-limiting beliefs, which are sort of stories that we tell ourselves over and over again. And very often it's taking a break, stopping that and thinking about all the positive reasons why you do what you do. And that's definitely something that I took away absolutely right. On the COVID example, so that situation, I remember having to adapt to delivering training sessions in the early days before Teams is much more advanced now than it was 5 years ago. So in the early days, we actually had to use WebEx. I remember there was a very small, having been used to running workshops of big groups for years, there was a very small part of my kitchen where I could put the camera and there was nothing behind me. So it looked like I was delivering training like normal. And I had to move my then 7-year-old son Lego out of the way and be able to run workshops for people across our offices all around the globe. But what was really good was we got the opportunity to make connections with people that we hadn't before. We got the opportunity to make groups of people from different offices spend time together and be in sessions together that they couldn't have done before. So we got the flexibility. We learned to be able to use the technology and the tools because it gave us the chance to think about doing things differently, which within learning and development right across every sector has been something we're always doing and thinking of doing. But circumstances gave us the opportunity and the driver to do that. So like you say, when you get over that initial shock and kind of started to feel a bit balanced, there were things we were able to take away from it. And I think what I took away from that lesson now, that situation now, is we're all much more resourceful than perhaps we give ourselves credit for, and recognizing that we can adapt and we can adjust and be confident in doing that.
Yeah. Oh, and it's one of the successes of, I suppose, flexible working is that we probably feel more connected to people that we've never met rather than people who sit on the desk next to us because we don't necessarily see them every day.
That's really
that's funny. And if you could give one piece of personal advice to someone about sort of being successful and being resilient, what do you think that would be?
It's really interesting to ask because it's something I get asked a lot, like I said, in my day job pattern. You think, how can I respond to change? And I think we know as people and professionals, and as an organisation, we're always going to be looking forward. We're going to be thinking, what can we do that continues to build on what we've already done so well? What can we do differently? What can we do to adapt? So change is going to happen. We will be doing things in new ways. And I think the best advice I can give someone is to know how you individually respond. So what you need. And we all have different reactions to change. We have different reactions ourselves to different types of change. So knowing what we're likely to see, what we need, being able to kind of spot those signs in ourselves as well, and what we need to understand and respond. And sometimes I often spend time when we work with tools or with groups around how you respond to change when it's happening. It can be thinking, well, do I need to understand the reason something's happening? So the intellectual case, if you like, that I can take away and I can think about. Do I need to understand the emotional reason something's changing? So what it means to me and how I respond to that. And whether you then need time to digest, time to think through, or sometimes the energy to be able to do things quickly. But know what you need to be able to put that in place, and then you can respond and use those techniques.
Great. Thank you very much, David. That's been really helpful.
Thank you.